Hi guys, welcome back aboard the 44-foot Antares DIY hurricane damaged catamaran project boat. This thing needs a ton of work. Luckily, I'm one of those people that enjoy messing around aboard old boats. In last week's video, I got started working on the TRAMP ramp that sits here between the two trampolines on the foredeck. As a quick little reminder, this is what the ramp looked like at the beginning of last week. It was a bunch of unfinished repairs. Luckily, it was nothing a bit of fiberglass couldn't fix. The ramp should now be structurally back in business, but it doesn't look like something that belongs on this soonish to be beautiful catamaran. This thing desperately needs a lick of fairing compound and a couple of coats of paint. For the bulk of the fairing, I will be using Totalboat's Total Fair. For the last finishing touches, I'll be using their polyester-based fairing compound. And then for the paint, and I'm really excited about this, I get to try Alexseal. Longtime viewers of the channel might remember that Andy from Boatworks Today made an appearance here on the channel about 7 years ago to give me some advice on repairing the deck aboard Athena. And now that we're here in the US, Andy sells Alexseal products. So that's exactly where I got all of my Alexseal products from. And I'd recommend, if you're going to be painting with Alexseal, you buy them from Andy instead of some big faceless corporation. But yeah, I'll leave a link for Andy's website down in the description. And also, if you are not familiar with his YouTube channel, Boatworks Today, I highly recommend you go check it out. I'll also leave a link for that down in the description. Once the boat is officially ours and I can go ahead and get tidied up here down under the boat and set up my little workshop, I'll put up one of Andy's stickers because I think he has one of my stickers on his bandsaw, so it only seems fair that I reciprocate. On the topic of Andy, he's also the reason why I discovered the Makita 9031, which is now one of my favorite tools for working with fiberglass. But enough yammering on, let's get some fairing compound on this thing. This thing is still looking mighty rough around the edges, but it's early on, so that's okay. What I'm trying to do now is just flatten the flat areas and also build up any outside corners so they're nice square so that I can easily round them over. And yeah, we'll get there. The good thing about this part is that it's not going to be super visible. The trampolines are going to hide a lot of it, and there's also two hatches that go on top of it and hide the compartment in there. So it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Technically, the boat is not ours yet, so I don't have a second project queued up that we can work on while the fairing compound is curing, but that's okay. Why don't I show you some of the yard instead? Today is Sunday, so it is super nice and quiet here. And we basically have the entire place to ourselves. I've got my keys, so we can also check out the workshop. As I've mentioned before, we are right in the middle of an industrial neighborhood. So yeah, this place looks pretty unassuming from the front. And oh, there's the spiffy mobile. No trespassing. Okay, let's jump inside. Right inside the front door, we immediately get to the first treasure compartment here. There is tons of used boat stuff here. I don't know what half of it is, but if we ever need some of this stuff, it's very close. So yeah, tons of treasures. In a place like this, if you have an older boat with a broken part, that part might very well be hiding in here. Like, even if it's some kind of old hatch or something, there's tons of stuff in here. From treasure room number 1, we get into the workshop, which is pretty dang big. There is a bunch of teak trim pieces over there. Next to those, there's a big assortment of doors up against the wall over there. There's a giant boat in here that the owner of the yard is fixing up. There appears to be a car under all of these cushions here. There is a ton of treasures in here too. There are some engines there. I think they're actively working on those. Yet another car. This one looks super spiffy though and doesn't cover. And then if we go over here in this corner, I think that's where we're hiding the engines for the catamaran. Yep, right inside of this plastic here, we have two Yanmar 30 horsepower engines. This is all I've seen of the engines so far, but hopefully in the not too distant future, we can get them fired up and check that they're actually working. Continuing the tour, it looks like there's a bunch of hatches up there. And if we go this way, there seems to be more engine stuff going on here. Oh, and we're back at the doors and that car under all of the cushions. If anybody's in the market for a used marine air conditioning unit, there's a bunch of them here. On that topic, I just don't understand how anybody would be able to survive here in Florida during the summer without air conditioning. Oh, it's hot. And on the topic of air conditioning, the office in here is air conditioned, which is really, really freaking awesome. And also there's a bunch of old marine electronics in here. But let's head back outside. The workshop here is not air conditioned and it is pretty sweltering in here. What's so awesome about this place is that it's in the middle of an industrial neighborhood. I mean, I kind of wish it wasn't next to the city dump and there weren't that many mosquitoes. But because it is an industrial neighborhood, right, nobody cares if you make noise, nobody cares if you make dust, and it's not that expensive. I think for the catamaran it's $3.50 a month, which around here is a really, really good deal. Back outside in the boat jungle, there are a couple of these boats that are actually for sale. I think they are qualified as somewhat extensive refits, but you might be able to get a good deal. I'm not really a powerboat guy, so I don't know a lot about those, but the owner of the yard mentioned that 2 or 3 of these boats you see here are for sale. More in my wheelhouse is the sailboat back here. I think it's a Gulfstar 47 Sailmaster, and that is also for sale. I did a bit of Googling yesterday, and for what it's worth, which is hard to tell with the internet, the Gulfstar boats don't seem to have the best reputation when it comes to build quality. That being said, on a boat like this, you are going to get a ton of space on the inside, so I think it will make for a great liveaboard boat. If anybody is interested, I would happily take my moisture meter and slap it on the hull and also the deck. Although, judging by the amount of mushrooms growing on the companionway, it's probably not a completely dry boat. Immediately after having said that, I noticed that this is where the mast steps, and at least it's dry down there. I am 6'2" and I've got tons of headroom in here, and yeah, there's absolutely tons of space here. Moving forward from the saloon, we get down into the galley here, which looks like it has a regular household fridge, so that's kind of awesome. And that's a very good size galley. Then we move forward further into the V-berth. Starting to move aft again, there's a door here that leads into the head, and the door immediately aft of this door also leads into the head. Back in the saloon, next to the companionway, is the entrance into the aft cabin, which is ginormous. And again, there is oodles of headroom down here, and this aft cabin is ginormous, as is the friggin' head. This is bigger than my first boat, basically. If you're looking for a lot of boat to have as a liveaboard boat for not very much money, something like this I think would be pretty awesome. That being said, I don't know anything about the state of this boat. I don't know if the decks are wet. I don't know if the hull has elevated moisture levels. I don't know if there are rotten bulkheads. I don't know much about this boat, but yeah, tons of room. If you're interested in the Gulfstar back there, I'd be happy to put you into contact with the owner of the yard. He's the one selling the boat. But yeah, I'll include my email down in the description. Thanks to the delightful Florida heat, the fairing compound was already ready for sanding. With a bit of luck, I might be able to get on 4 rounds of total fair per day. That was definitely not the case in Denmark. Any kind of straight edge is a super useful tool for identifying where more fairing compound is needed. But before worrying about any corners, I want to make sure I have all the other surfaces nice and flat. I found this really cool longboard Brian must have made. This is going to be a giant help for the big flat surface. I make sure to mark any imperfections so I remember where I need to add more fairing compound. Welcome to this week's installment of things I thought I would never have to frickin' do again after I sold my house, Weed Whacking Edition. There is a small forest of stuff growing around the catamaran, and while I appreciate a bit of nature as much as the next guy, this stuff is frankly a bit of a trip hazard. There are large areas I can't weed whack because there's just too much stuff in the way, but once the boat is ours and I can tidy up, this place is gonna be a freaking desert, not a plant in sight. All the insects will have to move 12 feet to either side to find their new accommodation. I'm making pretty decent progress with the fairing and getting this thing ready for paint, but Captain Dum Dum has made an appearance. I was standing here looking down this edge to see if I was getting it right. And as you can see, it's a nice straight shot down, and it actually looks pretty decent. There's a little bit more fairing compound needed, but it's starting to take the right shape. Except it's not the right freaking shape, because if you look over here, like I said, this is a nice straight shot over the trailing edge here. But if we direct our attention over here, the aftmost part of this is still flush with the edge here, which is the same on the other side. But this side has this freaking curved shape. Straight line, curved shape. The reason this happened is very straightforward. Most of this straight corner over here was missing last week when I rebuilt that area. And for whatever reason, I just didn't look at the other side to see what it was going to look like. I just assumed that it was a straight shot going back. The good news is I've got all the strength I need in the straight corner from last week, and that bit of raised curve on the other side is only a few millimeters high, so I can recreate that shape on the straight end just using fairing compound, but it's going to be a lot more work. As you can see here, there's also an excess of material that needs to be removed. I marked a line to help me not remove too much material and used the little belt sander to remove the bulk of what needed to be removed. And then I snuck up on the line carefully by hand. As you can see, I got pretty dang close. Before heading home, I was able to get on yet another application of Total Fair. Every night when I return to Athena, I import the day's footage and I just do like a rough edit of what I've got from the day. And last night I did the same thing, and that's when I noticed this little guy. Yep, what's that down there in the corner? It's a frickin' snake crossing my workspace. I don't really mind snakes that much, but I mind the fact that he was right there and I didn't notice him. I could easily have stepped on that thing. So maybe I should start tying bells to any snakes I find so they can announce their presence. On a positive note, that makes me feel really good about having weed whacked the area around the boat. At least that way, nothing can be hiding in the shrubbery. Back to the project at hand. My little Captain Dum Dum fix down here is coming along nicely. I almost have the shape recreated over on the straight side. Most of the fairing is done. I am almost ready to start creating the fillet that's going to go down the edge here. That is an inside corner, and those are the absolute worst. And this would also be an example of an inside corner. And if inside corners are annoying, then a three-way inside corner is absolutely the worst. I'm not a professional at this, so I'm sure this takes me a little bit longer than somebody that knows what they're actually doing, but yeah, we'll get there in the end. While I absolutely despise inside corners, outside corners are actually super fun. Again, I am not a professional at this, but I've had good luck with this method in the past. After having built up a nice sharp edge, I first break that into two 45 corners until there are no sharp bumps or transitions to the existing radius. I then break those two 45 corners again and then carefully round everything over by hand, leaving a really nice looking rounded corner. A big part of what I love about DIY is figuring things out. Like for instance, I figured out I can use a plastic spreader with some sandpaper to give me a super nice smooth corner. A quick check with the hatch revealed that I was pretty dang close, and any inaccuracies will be hidden when I round over the outside edge. I repeated the process for the Captain Dum Dum corner, and I gotta say, it's starting to look pretty dang spiffy, especially for just a stupid mistake. When fairing, my general rule is if you can feel an imperfection with your fingers, it will be visible. If you can't feel the imperfection with your fingers, it'll probably still be visible, but you gotta start somewhere. My last action of the day was to start making the fiddle on the inside of the compartment. Fiddle, fillet, tomato, aluminum, aluminium. It's the next day, and I think we're ready to start the finishing touches on the fairing using some of Totalboat's polyester fairing compound. The big upside to a polyester-based fairing compound is speed. It gets ready for sanding a lot quicker. I'm gonna switch to this stuff because of the speed, but also because this thing is above the waterline, and like I said, we just have to do the last finishing touches. The reason the speed is such a nice feature is because so much of fairing, especially if you're not a professional at it, comes down to just repetition, right? It's doing the same thing over and over again, just hunting smaller and smaller imperfections. And with this stuff, we should be ready to sand definitely within 30 minutes, whereas even in the Florida heat, the epoxy-based fairing compound, it takes about 3 hours or so. And when I say small imperfections, I do really mean small imperfections. The big camera is too big for picking it up, but if I use my phone, then I can definitely show you guys what I'm talking about. So, like for instance here, there's a tiny little bump there. There's a little bit of a scratch back here. Stuff like that, definitely good with the polyester filler. Interestingly, this polyester fairing compound has the catalyst in liquid form. All the other products I've used previously has had it in the form of a paste. I really like the liquid form because it's super easy to be accurate and consistent. After hopefully having taken care of the last few imperfections yesterday, although it would be very atypical if some doesn't pop up once we get primer on there, but yeah, I returned this morning and took care of the ever so important surface prep, got everything vacuumed and wiped down. So I think we're now ready for primer. The primer I'll be using is this stuff, Alexseal's Finish Primer 442. On a fun little side note here, this is the roller I'll be using. Andy has always been more of a mohair guy when it comes to rollers, and I've always been more of a foam guy, but I can't get the foam rollers I used back in Europe over here in the US, so I figured when in Rome, we'll give the mohair roller a try. Ta-da! This thing is not done yet, of course. This was just the first coat of primer, but I think we can all agree that considering what this thing used to look like, it's definitely moving in the right direction. I'm pretty pleased with how my Captain Dum-Dum fix over here turned out. If you compare that corner to this corner, I don't think anybody walking around on the deck will ever notice the difference between those two. As is customary with fairing jobs, at least when I do them, we have some imperfections that have popped up, like for instance over here we have a pinhole. Other than a few pinholes here and there, I think this is turning out pretty dang spiffy. Now, I did make one Captain Dum-Dum mistake, and previously in the past I've always used pencil to mark my imperfections when fairing. This time I didn't have a pencil, so I used a Sharpie, and it's kind of bleeding through the primer a little bit. I hope that's not going to be an issue, but if it is, we can always just sand a bit and that'll fix it. I was hoping to be able to apply top coat in this week's video also, but I made an executive decision and prioritized something else this week. Because if you guys recall in last week's video, I mentioned that the engines were the last thing we wanted to check out still before we were ready to buy the boat. And yesterday we actually got them fired up and they both seem to be in decent shape. So yeah, that's it. No more hurdles standing between us and buying this thing. Now there's just the matter of the paperwork. Once that's all squared away, I am so excited to get this place just all tidied up, get rid of all of this stuff so we can have a good workspace here under the boat. We're going to chop the mast into smaller sections and drop it off at the scrapyard. The hardtop does have a ton of damage to it, and we would like a hardtop that's a little bit bigger, so I think we're gonna cut that up into pieces and drop it off next door. And of course, there's also all of the stuff up inside of the boat. So yeah, I was kind of hoping I might be able to find a couple of local volunteers that would like to come here and help me for a day or so, just to see if we can get this place under control. I think it'll be sometime early September, mid-September maybe, and I think it's a great opportunity if you feel like you haven't been sweating enough lately, and if you want some kind of excuse to not go to the gym but just come here instead. Great opportunity. But yeah, if you think that might be fun, go ahead and send me an email on oglorioussanding@gmail.com. As far as next week's video, I'm gonna have to bust out a video that was shot aboard Athena a couple of weeks back, because next week I'm gonna be helping my brother-in-law move their catamaran a bit further north, and that means I don't have time to shoot a catamaran video. And in fact, I think we'll just put the catamaran on a bit of a pause until the paperwork is finally figured out and done, and it's officially our boat. Also, in terms of next week's video, that video is going to be our first sponsored video in, I think, 5 years or something like that. After the whole AdSense debacle that happened also a few weeks back, well, that kind of really shook us up, because that would have meant potentially losing 40% of our income. So we've signed up with an influencer marketing agency, and they're gonna be seeing if they can find some sponsors for us. But the term influencer, and on that bit of a personal opinion, we'll end this week's video here. I hope to see all of you guys back aboard. Well, we'll start out the video here, but then go to Athena next week. So yeah, as always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video, please remember to leave a like. See you.